For 28 years, my wife withdrew $1,200 every Friday. When she died, I found the notebook and discovered she'd paid our daughter nearly $2 million to keep a secret. The secret that destroyed our family. Hello, friends. We're so glad you're here for this journey. If you're finding this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Let us know in the comments which part has surprised you the most. A quick disclaimer, this narrative includes fictional characters and scenarios created for entertainment and reflection. Any resemblance to real individuals or locations is purely coincidental, though the themes of justice and family remain deeply authentic. They say you never really know someone until they're gone. I thought I knew Helen Warren, my wife of 48 years, better than I knew myself. I was wrong. The October morning was cold, the kind that seeps through your coat and settles in your bones. Oak trees lined the cemetery grounds, their leaves brilliant amber and crimson. Grand Rapids had never looked more beautiful, and I had never felt more hollow. Helen's casket, simple, elegant, just as she would have wanted, rested beneath a canopy while Pastor Matthews spoke words I couldn't quite hear. My mind drifted through decades of memories: our first date at the county fair, the way she laughed when I spilled punch on my shirt, the morning I found her crying over a baby bird that had fallen from its nest. She had the biggest heart of anyone I'd ever known. I stood at 70 years old, a retired mechanical engineer who'd spent his career building things that lasted. I thought our marriage would last too. It did, I suppose, until her heart gave out 3 weeks ago. The doctors said it was sudden, painless. But there's no mercy in losing the person who made you whole. Around me, people offered condolences. Neighbors from Wealthy Street, former colleagues, Helen's book club friends. Our 2 daughters stood on either side of me, Natalie and Angela, as different as summer and winter. Angela, my youngest at 38, held my arm gently. Her eyes were red from crying. She'd always been close to her mother, calling every Sunday, visiting twice a month. Natalie, my eldest at 48, stood with her arms crossed. Her husband Trevor was away on business, so she'd come alone. She wore a black designer dress, and her face showed more irritation than grief. People grieve differently, I told myself. Then I saw it. The watch. Sunlight caught the timepiece on Natalie's wrist, and for a moment I forgot where I was. The watch gleamed like liquid silver. Patek Philippe, the kind of luxury that cost more than most people's cars. That particular model platinum case moon phase display was worth at least $35,000. I knew watches, and I knew Natalie's salary. She worked in real estate, made around $55,000 a year. Trevor made decent money, but they had expenses. So how was she wearing a watch worth more than half her annual salary? The service ended. People dispersed. Angela excused herself, and I found myself standing near Natalie, trying not to stare at her wrist. "Beautiful service," someone said. "I suppose," Natalie replied flatly, or though Mother would have thought it was too much fuss. The comment struck me as odd. Helen had loved gatherings, loved bringing people together. And honestly, I don't know why she insisted on being buried here. It's so far from everything. But that was Mother always making things difficult. My jaw tightened. Difficult was the last word I'd used to describe Helen. Angela must have overheard. She appeared at my side, voice sharp. "Natalie, that's completely unfair. Mom chose this cemetery because it's peaceful, because it's where Grandma and Grandpa are buried." "Oh, please," Natalie said, examining her nails and that gleaming watch. "Let's not pretend Mother was a saint. She had her secrets just like everyone else." The words hung in the air. Secrets. What secrets? "What's that supposed to mean?" Angela demanded. "Nothing. I'm just saying we shouldn't romanticize the past. You know what? I don't need this right now." Angela's voice cracked. "Today is about honoring Mom, not girls." I stepped between them. Not here, not today. Natalie shrugged and walked away, that expensive watch catching the light with every step. Angela watched her go, tears streaming. Dad, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. It's okay, sweetheart. I pulled her into a hug. Your mother would understand. But as I held Angela, my eyes followed Natalie. The watch, the coldness, the comment about secrets. Something wasn't right. The rest of the day passed in a blur. People came to our house on Rosewood Avenue. They brought casseroles and condolences. Angela stayed until evening. Natalie left early, claiming she had work. By 11 that night, the house was empty. Silent. Too silent. I sat in my recliner and stared at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that watch. $35,000. On a salary of $55,000 a year. The math didn't work. Helen's voice echoed in my memory. Watch the details, Philip. The small things always tell you the truth. Midnight came and went. I thought about Helen's final days. How she'd seemed tired. How she'd spent hours organizing papers, closing accounts. At the time, I'd assumed she was being practical. Helen had always been organized. But what if there was more to it? What if she'd known something I didn't? The clock ticked past 12:30. I should sleep. But I couldn't shake the image of that watch, or Natalie's words, she had her secrets. Before I realized what I was doing, I was standing, walking through the living room, climbing the stairs. My feet carried me past family photos spanning decades. I stopped outside Helen's bedroom door. We'd stopped sharing a room 5 years ago when her sleep apnea got worse. She'd moved into the guest room so I could rest. That was Helen, always putting others first. Now the door stood closed exactly as she'd left it. I'd been avoiding this room for 3 weeks, but tonight, something pulled me forward. My hand reached for the knob. The door swung open on silent hinges, and I stepped into darkness. Helen's room smelled exactly as it always had, lavender and vanilla, the scent of the lotion she'd used every night. Moonlight filtered through lace curtains, casting patterns across the hardwood floor. Everything was exactly where she'd left it. The jewelry box on the dresser, library, books on the nightstand, reading glasses folded neatly beside them. It felt like trespassing, like entering a space that wasn't mine, even though we'd shared a home for nearly 5 decades. Helen had made this room her own in those final years, and I'd respected that boundary. Now, standing in the doorway at 1 a.m, I wondered what else I'd been too respectful to question. I flicked on the small lamp. Warm light spilled across the queen-sized mattress with its faded quilt, the one Helen's grandmother had made. Some things you hold on to, she'd told me once. I didn't know where to start. That watch on Natalie's wrist kept flashing through my mind. $35,000. And Helen's papers all organized so carefully in those final weeks. She'd been preparing for something. I started with the dresser. Top drawer scarves and handkerchiefs. Second drawer sweaters arranged by color. The closet held her dresses, shoes lined up in precise rows. Everything exactly where it should be. The nightstand was next. I pulled open the single drawer. Instead of receipts or spare glasses, I found envelopes, photographs, a rosary, and beneath it all, a notebook. Blue. Plain. The kind you could buy at any drugstore for a couple of dollars. The cover was worn at the corners, soft from years of handling. I lifted it carefully and sat on the edge of Helen's bed. I opened it. The first page was dated January 12, 1996, nearly 29 years ago. Helen's handwriting, careful, precise cursive, filled the lines. January 12, 1996, Friday, 9:30 a.m., $1,200. January 19, 1996, Friday, 9:30 a.m., $1,200. January 26, 1996, Friday, 9:30 a.m., $1. 200, I flipped forward. February, March, April, page after page, year after year. Every single Friday, the same time, the same amount. $1,200. My hands started to shake. I'd spent 40 years as a mechanical engineer. Numbers were my language, so my mind did what it always did. It started adding. 52 weeks in a year. 28 years. 1,456 weeks. 1,456 times $1,200. I grabbed a pen and scribbled on an old envelope. The total stared back at me, $1,747,200. I read the number again. Surely I'd made a mistake. But engineers don't make arithmetic errors. I flipped through the notebook faster. 1997, 1998, 1999. The years blurred together, but the pattern never changed. Every Friday, $1,200. No exceptions. Not for holidays, not for illness. How had I not noticed? But I knew the answer. I'd worked overtime weekends, whatever it took to provide. Helen had handled everything else, the house, the bills, the girls' activities. I'd trusted her completely. And she'd been hiding this. I reached the final pages. The entries continued right up until 3 weeks ago, the Friday before Helen passed away. September 29th, 2024, $1,200. But below that final entry, Helen had written something else. Just one word in slightly shakier handwriting. Done. That was it. Done. No explanation. I stared at that word until my vision blurred. What did it mean? Done with what? Done hiding, done living with this burden. The room felt suddenly smaller. I looked around at Helen's things. Her favorite cardigan. Her teacups, the framed photo from our wedding. 48 years ago, we'd promised to share everything. But she'd kept this from me. Nearly $1.75 million, and I'd never known. Where had the money gone? Helen had never been extravagant. She shopped at garage sales. She clipped coupons. She wore the same winter coat for 15 years. So where had $1.75 million gone? My mind raced. Secret debt, we'd paid off the house. Medical bills, we had insurance. Gambling, Helen had never even bought a lottery ticket. Then a darker thought, blackmail. Someone forcing her to pay week after week, year after year. But who and why? And why had she never told me? I thought about Natalie's watch again. $35,000. And her words, mother had her secrets. Had she known the clock glowed 2:47 a.m.? I'd been sitting in this room for nearly 2 hours. I stood slowly, my knees protesting. I tucked the notebook under my arm. Tomorrow, I'd go to the bank. Helen had done her withdrawals on Fridays at 9:30. That meant records. Someone had to know what this was about. I turned off the lamp and walked back to my bedroom. I lay down on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those numbers. $1,200. 28 years. $1,747,200. And one word, done. At 3 in the morning, I gave up and turned on the television, letting the low murmur of a late-night talk show fill the silence. But I wasn't watching. I was thinking about tomorrow, about walking into that bank and asking questions I didn't want answers to. Because whatever I was about to learn, whatever truth was waiting in those banking records, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: nothing would ever be the same again. The bank opened at 9. I was there at 8:45. I'd given up on sleep around 5, watching the sky shift from black to pale October blue. By 7, I'd made coffee I couldn't drink. The blue notebook sat on the kitchen table, pulsing with secrets. The drive to First National Bank took 12 minutes. I'd banked there for 30 years. Helen had too, though apparently she'd kept some things separate. Smart, I'd thought. Everyone deserves financial independence. But this was something else. The parking lot was nearly empty when I pulled in. I waited until exactly 9, grabbed the notebook and walked inside. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and printer toner. A teller smiled. Good morning. How can we help you? I need to speak with a manager about my late wife's account. The smile faltered. Of course. Let me get Mrs. Peterson. Linda Peterson was in her early 60s, silver haircut and a practical bob. I'd met her a few times over the years, bank functions, community events. She'd managed this branch for as long as I could remember. She emerged from a back office, professionally sympathetic. Philip, I was so sorry to hear about Helen. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I need to see my wife's banking records, all of them. Surprise flickered across her face. Of course, step into my office. The office was small but tidy, family photos on the desk. Mrs. Peterson settled behind her computer. I'll need to verify your identification, but as Helen's husband, you have full access. What are you looking for? I placed the blue notebook on her desk. Withdrawals. Every Friday for 28 years. $1,200 each time. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. You want records going back to 1996? Yes. May I ask what this is about? I opened the notebook. Rows of dates and amounts in Helen's handwriting. I found this last night. I didn't know anything about it. Peterson's eyes widened as she scanned the entries. She turned to her computer. Give me a few minutes. The wait felt endless. I listened to keyboard clicks and the heating system hum, trying not to think about what I was about to learn. But my brain kept circling back. $1,200, 52 weeks, 28 years. $1,747,200. All right, Mrs. Peterson said. I have the records. She angled the monitor. Helen opened this account in January 1996, separate from your joint, checking her personal account funded by an inheritance. Her mother's estate. Helen's mother had passed in 1995. I'd never asked about the inheritance. We'd never scrutinized each other's finances. The initial deposit was nearly $2 million, Mrs. Peterson continued. And then starting in January 1996, the screen filled with transactions. Weekly withdrawals, every Friday, $1,200. Cash. Cash. My stomach dropped. Not checks, not wire transfers. Cash. All the way through September, Mrs. Peterson said quietly. The last withdrawal was September 29th, 2024, 3 weeks before Helen passed away. 28 years of withdrawals. The dates matched Helen's notebook exactly. Every week. Never missed. What's the current balance? Mrs. Peterson clicked another screen. Her expression shifted. $12.83. The number hung between us. $12.83. From nearly $2 million. She said gently. Did Helen ever mention why she was making these withdrawals? No. I didn't know the account existed. She looked at me with pity. Helen came in every Friday for years. Same time, always 9:30. She'd fill out a withdrawal slip, take the cash, and leave. She seemed like someone doing something she had to do, not something she wanted to do. Did she ever explain why? No. Banking regulations prevent us from asking, and Helen was always very private, very composed. Mrs. Peterson leaned forward. If you didn't know about this, is it possible someone was forcing her, threatening her? The word hit like a blow. Threatening. Someone threatening Helen. I don't know, I said. I don't know anything anymore. Mrs. Peterson printed a summary 28 years condensed into 30 pages. She placed the stack in a folder. If you need anything else, please call. And Philip, if you think Helen was in some kind of trouble, you might want to talk to the police. I nodded, but I wasn't listening. Nearly $2 million gone. $1,200 every week. Cash. Untraceable. Who was she paying, and why? I drove home in a daze. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house Helen and I had shared for almost 5 decades. She'd walked out every Friday morning for 28 years, driven to that bank, withdrawn $1,200, and then, where had she gone? What had she done with the money? And why, after 48 years of marriage, had she never said a word? I looked down at the folder. 30 pages of evidence that my wife had been living a secret life. The question burned in my chest. Who was she paying and why? I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. The folder from the bank lay open in front of me, 30 pages of transactions I didn't understand. The blue notebook sat beside it. Helen's careful handwriting, a testament to 28 years of secrets. I needed answers, and the only people who might have them were my daughters. I dialed Natalie first. She answered on the 4th ring. Dad, is everything okay? I need you to come to the house today. It's important. A pause. I'm with a client. Can it wait? No. Another pause. Fine. I'll be there around 3. She hung up. I called Angela next. She answered immediately. Dad, what's wrong? Can you come over? I found something about your mother. Oh my God, of course. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The difference between those 2 calls told me everything. Or maybe grief was making me paranoid, but then I thought about that watch on Natalie's wrist. Angela arrived first, just after 3. She'd been crying, red eyes, tissue clutched in her hand. She hugged me tight. What did you find? I led her to the kitchen, showed her the notebook, the bank statements, watched her face shift from confusion to shock to horror. $1,200, she whispered, every week for 28 years. 1.7 million, I said. It's gone, Angela, all of it. $12 left. Where did it go? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I sat down. Did your mother ever say anything about money or problems? No, nothing. Dad, I talked to Mom every week. If something was wrong, she would have told me. I wanted to say yes, but Helen had hidden this from me for 48 years. The doorbell rang. Natalie walked in, still wearing her designer dress and that gleaming watch. She looked annoyed. This better be important. I had to reschedule 3 appointments. Sit down, I said. Something in my voice made her pause. She glanced at the papers on the table. What's going on? I told her. About the notebook, about the bank, about the weekly withdrawals that had drained nearly $2 million. I watched her face carefully. What I saw was surprise, but it felt wrong too, performed. That's impossible, Natalie said. Mom wouldn't. Why would she do that? That's what I'm trying to understand. I pushed the notebook across the table. Look at it. Every Friday, same amount. 28 years. Natalie flipped through a few pages. Her expression was carefully neutral. And you had no idea. None. What about you, Angela? Angela shook her head. Nothing. Natalie set the notebook down. Where did the money come from? Your grandmother's estate. And it's all gone? $12.83. Natalie leaned back and I saw her glance at her watch. That expensive watch. Quick automatic, but I caught it. And what about the bank? Did they tell you anything? Just what's in the records. Cash withdrawals, every Friday at 9:30. Cash. Natalie's eyebrows rose. So there's no way to trace it. No. She drummed her fingers on the table. I can help with this, Dad. I know people, bankers, financial advisors. Someone might be able to figure out what Mom was doing. Angela frowned. Why would your contacts know anything about this? Because they deal with large cash transactions, Natalie said sharply. I'm trying to help. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm not sure anyone can help. The money's gone. But don't you want to know where it went? Natalie pressed. What if someone was taking advantage of Mom? What if she was being threatened? The word hung in the air. Threatened. If she was being threatened, Angela said quietly. Why didn't she tell Dad? Maybe she was trying to protect us, Natalie said. But her tone was too smooth, too rehearsed. I looked at my eldest daughter and felt doubt settle in my chest. Where did you get that watch? The question came out before I could stop it. Natalie's hand went to her wrist. At what? The Patek Philippe. At your mother's funeral. It's worth at least $35,000. Her expression flickered anger or maybe fear. Then the mask was back. Trevor bought it for me, for our anniversary. That's generous. It is. She stood abruptly. I have to go, clients waiting, but Dad let me help. I want to figure out what happened just as much as you do. She grabbed her purse and left. Angela and I watched her go. Neither of us spoke until we heard her car start. She's lying, Angela said softly. I know. About the watch. About wanting to help. Angela turned to me, tears in her eyes. Dad, what if Natalie's involved? The thought had been circling since the funeral, but hearing Angela say it made it real. I don't know, I said. But I'm going to find out. What do? We investigate. Just you and me. We don't tell Natalie anything. Where do we start? I thought about Helen's study, her computer, her files. Your mother left clues. We just need to find them. Angela and I stood on Tony Romano's front porch at 9 the next morning, Helen's laptop tucked under my arm. Tony had been a colleague at the plant, one of the few who could troubleshoot both mechanical systems and computers. We'd worked together for 15 years before he took early retirement. After his wife passed, he'd turned his basement into a tech workshop. If anyone could unlock Helen's secrets, it was Tony. He opened the door, coffee mug in hand. At 62, he looked the same, thin, wiry, sharp eyes. Philip. He clasped my hand. Sorry to hear about Helen. Thank you. Tony, this is my daughter Angela. Nice to meet you. He stepped aside. You said something about computer help. The basement was exactly what I expected. 3 monitors, towers of hard drives, cables everywhere. The air smelled like electronics. What have we got? Tony gestured to his workbench. I set down the laptop. I need to see what's on this. Everything. Even deleted files. Tony studied me. This is about Helen. Yes. Okay, let me see. Angela and I stood behind him as he logged in. The desktop appeared neat folders labeled recipes, book club, photos. Tony clicked through directories. Your wife was methodical, everything sorted. Makes my job easier. Can you search for financial records? Sure. His fingers moved quickly. Results scrolled. She scanned a lot of documents. He opened a folder. Dozens of PDF files appeared, photographs of checks. Every check made out to cash for $1,200. Dates stretching back years. She documented everything, Angela whispered. Tony navigated to Helen's email. Most messages were ordinary. But buried in a subfolder labeled Banking, he found hundreds of automated emails from First National Bank. Withdrawal confirmations. Every Friday going back to January 1996. He found spreadsheets tracking every withdrawal, scanned documents, tax records, account statements. Everything connected to that secret account preserved digitally. Then he found the folder. Wait. Tony's cursor hovered. What's this? The folder was labeled 1996. My chest tightened. 1996, the year everything began. Open it, I said. Tony double-clicked. A password prompt appeared. Encrypted. She didn't want anyone seeing this. Can you break it? Angela asked. Maybe. Depends on the encryption. He typed commands. Code scrolled. Give me a minute. The minutes stretched to 20. Tony worked silently while Angela and I stood waiting. I could hear computers humming, keyboard clicking, my heartbeat. Got something, Tony finally said. I can't open the files yet, but I can see the file names. He pulled up a list. 3 items, accident_report. .pdf letters .docx photos _1996.zip. The words blurred. Accident report. Letters. Photos. All from 1996. What accident? Angela asked. I don't know. But pieces were clicking together. Natalie would have been 20 in 1996. The withdrawals started that year. Helen had hidden these files, encrypted them. Tony, how long to break the encryption? Few hours, maybe longer. Your wife knew what she was doing. Can you have it by tomorrow? Yeah, come back in the morning. Angela drove us home. Neither of us spoke. My mind kept circling back to that folder. 1996. Accident report. Letters. Dad, Angela said as we pulled in. Do you remember anything unusual from 1996, anything involving Natalie? I thought back. Natalie had been 20, living at home, working part-time, taking community college classes. Except there had been something. Late summer. Natalie had been upset, wouldn't talk. Helen had told me it was nothing. I'd been working long hours. I hadn't pressed. I'm not sure, I told Angela, but I'm going to find out. That evening, I pulled out the blue notebook. January 12th, 1996, the first $1,200 withdrawal. What had happened before that date? I thought about the files. Accident report. Letters. Someone had documented an accident, and Helen had kept it all locked away. I opened my laptop and searched. The construction company I'd worked for in 1996 was gone, but the people, some had to still be around. I found a name, Dennis Fletcher, site foreman on the Riverside project in 1996. Gruff, no nonsense. Ran the crew with precision. I tracked down a phone number and called. An elderly voice answered. Hello, Dennis Fletcher. Who's asking? Philip Warren. We worked together in 96, the Riverside project. A long pause. Warren? Yeah. What do you want? I need to talk about something that happened that year. An accident. The silence was heavy. When Fletcher spoke again, his voice had changed, harder, guarded. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, it's about my wife. She passed away and I can't help you. The line went dead. I sat holding the phone, my hand shaking. Fletcher knew something. I'd heard it in his voice, recognition, fear. Tomorrow I'd get those files from Tony, and then I'd pay Dennis Fletcher a visit in person. Whatever happened in 1996, I was going to find out. Dennis Fletcher lived in a neighborhood that had seen better days, modest ranch houses with sagging porches and overgrown lawns. The kind of place where retired working men spent their final years watching the world move on without them. I pulled up to his house at 4 that afternoon. I hadn't waited for Tony to decrypt Helen's files. I couldn't. Fletcher knew something, and I needed to hear it from him directly. The front door was faded green paint peeling at the edges. I knocked hard enough to hurt my knuckles. Fletcher opened the door slowly. He looked older than I remembered, probably 75 now, maybe 80. His face was weathered like old leather, and his eyes held the kind of weariness that comes from carrying secrets too long. "Warren." His voice was flat. "I told you on the phone. You hung up on me," I said. "But I'm not going away. We need to talk about 1996. You don't understand what you're asking. Then help me understand." I stepped closer. My wife withdrew nearly $2 million over 28 years. It started in 1996. I found files on her computer, accident report letters, photos. All from that year. "Tell me what happened." Fletcher's shoulders sagged. For a long moment, he just stood there, one hand gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing holding him upright. Then he stepped back. "Come inside. I'll tell you. But you won't like what you hear." The living room was dim and cluttered, worn furniture, stacks of old newspapers, framed photos of grandchildren I'd never met. Fletcher lowered himself into a recliner that had molded to his shape over decades. I sat on the edge of the couch, too tense to lean back. 1996, Fletcher said finally. "The Riverside Project. You were on that job, weren't you?" "Yes. I was doing mechanical engineering for the HVAC systems. I was site foreman. Safety was my responsibility." He rubbed his face. "We had an accident that summer. Bad one. Worker got hurt." My stomach tightened. "What happened?" "Scaffolding collapsed. Support beam got knocked loose. The whole thing came down. Man named Carlos Rodriguez was on it when it fell. Broke both his legs, messed up his back real bad. He never worked construction again." I tried to remember. Summer of 1996. I'd been focused on the mechanical systems, not the construction side. Accidents happened on sites, I knew that. But I didn't remember this one. "What does this have to do with Helen?" I asked. Fletcher looked at me for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Your daughter was there that day." The words didn't make sense at first. "What, Natalie?" "She was 20. Had some college boyfriend who worked on the crew, I can't remember his name. She'd come by the site sometimes to meet him for lunch. That day she was up on the platform. Don't ask me why she was allowed up there, she shouldn't have been. But she was. And she knocked the support beam. Wasn't paying attention, fooling around, just careless. But that beam was all that was holding the scaffolding steady. When it went, Carlos went with it. I couldn't breathe. Natalie caused the accident. Witnesses saw her. Carlos saw her. It wasn't intentional, but it was her fault." Fletcher's hands shook. "She could have been charged reckless endangerment at minimum. Carlos could have sued, could have pressed criminal charges. Your daughter could have gone to jail." "Why didn't he?" Fletcher closed his eyes. "Because your wife paid him not to." The room tilted. I gripped the arm of the couch. "What?" "Natalie came to me that night. She was terrified, crying. Said she'd ruined her life, that she'd go to prison. She begged me to help." Fletcher opened his eyes and they were wet. "I should have told her to face the consequences. I should have done the right thing. But I was young enough and stupid enough to think I could fix it." "What did you do?" "I wrote a letter. Made it look like some anonymous witness was threatening to report the accident to the police unless Natalie's family paid to keep quiet. $1,200, I wrote. That was the number I came up with. Seemed like enough to scare them into taking it seriously. My mind was reeling. You blackmailed my wife. I thought it would be once. Fletcher said, his voice cracking. Just once. Scare Natalie's mother into paying. Make sure Carlos got enough money to cover his medical bills and keep quiet. Then it would be over, and everyone could move on. Natalie paid me $500 for writing that first letter. I gave the rest to Carlos along with the $1,200 from your wife. But it wasn't once. No. Fletcher's face crumpled. It wasn't. A month later, your wife got another letter. Same handwriting, same threat, same amount. Then another the next month. Every week like clockwork. Natalie, I whispered. She kept writing them. I didn't know at first. Took me almost a year to figure it out. By then, your wife had paid tens of thousands of dollars. When I confronted Natalie, she laughed. Said her mother was rich from the inheritance, said $1,200 a week was nothing. Said if I told anyone, she'd claim I'd written all the letters myself. Why didn't you go to the police? Because I had written that first letter. I was complicit. If I'd turned her in, I'd have gone down too. I had a wife, grandkids. I was a coward. Fletcher wiped his eyes. I've carried this for 28 years, Warren. Every time I saw your wife at the grocery store or the bank, I thought about what I'd done, what I'd helped your daughter do. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I couldn't sit anymore. I couldn't be in that room with Fletcher's guilt and my own dawning horror. My daughter, I said slowly, blackmailed her own mother for 28 years, took nearly $2 million. Let Helen carry that burden alone until the day she passed away. I'm sorry. Sorry, I turned on him. My wife is gone. She died keeping this secret. And you're sorry. I know it's not enough. Nothing I say will ever be enough. Fletcher looked up at me. But for what it's worth, your wife was a good woman. She protected Natalie even when it cost her everything. That's the kind of love most people never know. I walked to the door. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely turn the knob. One more thing, Fletcher called after me. Carlos Rodriguez, he's still alive. Lives at Clearview Care Center now. If you want the whole truth, you should talk to him. I didn't answer. I walked out into the late afternoon sunlight and got into my car. For a long time, I just sat there staring at nothing. My daughter was the blackmailer, the person who had stolen nearly $2 million from her own mother. The reason Helen had lived 28 years in fear and silence. Natalie had done this, my firstborn child. The little girl I'd taught to ride a bike and driven to college orientations. She'd looked me in the eye at Helen's funeral and hadn't flinched. I started the car, my vision blurred with tears. I hadn't let myself cry until now. My daughter was the blackmailer all along, and I was going to prove it. I didn't sleep after leaving Dennis Fletcher's house. By dawn, I'd given up trying. I made coffee and sat in Helen's study, surrounded by her things, the desk where she'd paid bills, the filing cabinet where she'd kept our lives organized. The mail came at 8. Bills, advertisements, and one thick envelope with a law firm's return address, Larson and Associates. I didn't recognize the name. Our family lawyer was Charles Newman, a man I'd known for 30 years. This was someone else. I opened it, standing in the hallway. Inside was a letter on heavy paper, the kind lawyers use to make everything seem official. Relast will and testament of Philip Robert Warren. This letter serves as notification that a last will and testament bearing your signature was filed with Kent County Probate Court on July 15, 2024. The will designates your daughter, Natalie Marie Patterson, as sole beneficiary of your estate upon your death. All assets, including real property, financial accounts, and personal effects, will transfer to Mrs. Patterson. July 15th, 3 months ago. Helen had still been alive then. I walked back to the study and pulled open the filing cabinet. There in a folder labeled Estate Planning was my actual will, the one I'd drawn up with Charles Newman 15 years ago, the one that split everything equally between Natalie and Angela. I grabbed the phone and dialed Newman's office. "Charles, I need you to look something up. Kent County Probate Court. There's supposedly a will filed under my name. July 15th this year." I heard typing. "Hold on. Yes, I see it. Filed by Kevin Larson's office. Philip, I didn't draft this. When did you copy?" "I didn't. I never signed any new will." The typing stopped. "And you're certain, completely certain?" "Philip, if someone filed a will with your forged signature, that's fraud. That's elder abuse. That's a felony." "I know. My daughter filed it. Natalie." A long pause. "I need to see the document. Can you come to my office?" "I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and stared at the letter. 3 months ago, Natalie had filed this while Helen was dying. The phone rang. "Angela. Dad, are you okay? I need you to come over, now." "What's wrong? Just come, please." She arrived 20 minutes later. I handed her the letter without speaking. I watched her face as she read. Confusion first, then disbelief, then fury. "She forged your signature." Angela's voice shook. "She filed a fake will while your mother was dying. This can't be legal. You didn't sign this." "I didn't. I'm meeting with Charles Newman this morning to contest it." I took the letter back. Think about what this means. The money from Helen's inheritance, nearly $2 million, it's gone. Natalie took it all. That watch at the funeral, $35,000. Her salary is $55,000 a year. She spent everything, and now she needs more. She needs your estate. Angela sat down heavily. The house, your pension, your savings. And she was willing to forge legal documents to get it. Angela looked up at me. "Dad, what if? What if she tries something? What if waiting for you to pass away naturally isn't fast enough?" The thought had occurred to me too. I don't think she'd... Wouldn't she? She blackmailed her own mother for 28 years. She forged your will. "I'm being careful," I said. "And I'm gathering evidence. Everything I find, I'm documenting." "We're going to stop her, Dad. We have to." I spent the rest of the morning at Charles Newman's office. He examined the forged will with careful attention. "The signature's good," he admitted. "Close enough to yours that most people wouldn't question it. But there are tells the pressure's wrong in a few places. An expert would catch it." "So what do we do?" "We file a motion to contest the will. We report the forgery to the police and Adult Protective Services. We get a handwriting expert to testify." Newman looked at me over his reading glasses. "Philip, this is going to get ugly. You understand that you're accusing your daughter of multiple felonies." "She committed multiple felonies. I know. I'm just saying once we start this process, there's no going back. Your relationship with Natalie will be destroyed." I thought about Helen. About 28 years of Friday mornings driving to the bank withdrawing $1,200 in cash. About the final entry in the blue notebook, done. About the $12.83 left in an account that had once held $2 million. "My relationship with Natalie was destroyed a long time ago," I said. "I just didn't know it." Newman nodded. "I'll start the paperwork today." I left his office at noon. The sun was bright, the fall air crisp. Everything looked normal. Cars driving past people, walking dogs, the world continuing like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I knew who Natalie was now. Not my daughter. Not really. Maybe she had been once a long time ago. But somewhere along the way, she'd become someone capable of destroying her own family for money. I knew what she'd done: blackmail, forgery, fraud, elder abuse. But I needed to know everything. Every lie she'd told, every document she'd forged, every scheme she'd planned. Because when I brought her down, and I would bring her down, I needed evidence so solid that no one could doubt what she'd done. I drove home and pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same as always, the two-story Helen had loved with the garden she'd tended for decades. But nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. I knew who she was. I knew what she'd done. And I was going to find everything else, every piece of evidence, every hidden crime, every dark secret my daughter had buried. Starting now. The email arrived at 11:45 that night. I'd been sitting in my study for hours, unable to think about anything except the files Tony Romano was decrypting. Angela had stayed with me after we left Charles Newman's office, neither of us willing to be alone with what we'd learned about Natalie. My laptop chimed. Tony's name appeared in my inbox. Subject: files ready. Philip encryption broken. Files attached. Be prepared. What's in here isn't easy to see. Call if you need to talk. Tony, I clicked download and watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Angela pulled her chair closer. Are you ready for this? I asked. I don't know, but we have to look. The folder opened. 3 items just as Tony had found earlier: accident_report, .pdf letters, .docx photos, _1996, .zip. I clicked on the photos first. The first image filled the screen, a construction site bathed in harsh afternoon sunlight. I recognized it immediately. The Riverside Project. Summer of 1996. I'd worked on the mechanical systems for that building, but I'd never seen this part. This damage. Scaffolding lay collapsed in a twisted heap. Equipment scattered across the ground. Yellow tape marked the perimeter. Scene markers with numbers stood beside pieces of metal and concrete. The timestamp in the corner read, August 23rd, 1996. That's where it happened, Angela whispered. I clicked through more photos, different angles of the same scene, close-ups of the failed support beam, wide shots showing the scale of the collapse. Every image was clinical professional, the kind of documentation safety inspectors created after serious accidents. But even clinical photos couldn't hide the severity of what had happened. I closed the photo folder and opened the accident report. Riverside Construction Project. Incident report date: August 23rd, 1996, time 2:17 p.m. Incident type: scaffolding collapse. I scanned through pages of technical details, load specifications, safety protocols, witness statements. Then I found the section that mattered. Witness statement: Foreman Dennis Fletcher. At approximately 2:15 p.m., I observed an unauthorized individual on the third-level platform. Female, approximately 20 years old, not wearing required safety equipment. Before I could intervene, the individual made contact with support beam 7C. The beam became dislodged, causing catastrophic failure of the scaffolding structure. Witness statement: Worker Miguel Santos. I saw a young woman up there. She wasn't supposed to be on the platform. She was fooling around, not paying attention. She bumped the support beam, didn't knock it hard, but it was enough. The whole thing started coming down. Injured party: Carlos Rodriguez. Injuries: bilateral leg fractures, lumbar spine compression, multiple contusions, prognosis, extended recovery, permanent disability, likely. I sat back. The clinical language couldn't hide the human cost. A man's life had been permanently altered because my daughter had been careless. Dad, Angela said quietly, I need to tell you something. I should have told you years ago. I turned to her. Her face was pale in the laptop's glow. What is it, sweetheart? I suspected Natalie. The words came out in a rush. Not about the blackmail, I didn't know about that. But I knew something was wrong. She was spending money she shouldn't have. Wearing expensive clothes, going on trips, buying things. Her salary couldn't cover it. Why didn't you tell me? Angela's eyes filled with tears. I tried talking to Mom. Maybe 5 years ago I noticed how stressed she looked. I asked if everything was okay with money. She shut me down, said it was handled, told me not to worry. And when I confronted Natalie, asked her where she was getting all this money, she threatened me. She threatened you. Told me to stay out of it. Said it didn't concern me, and if I kept asking questions, I'd regret it. Angela wiped her eyes. I was scared, Dad. Scared of what Natalie might do. Scared of tearing the family apart. So I kept quiet. And now Mom's gone, and I keep thinking if I'd been braver, if I'd pushed harder, maybe I could have stopped this. I reached over and took her hand. This isn't your fault. Natalie manipulated all of us. She manipulated your mother for 28 years. You were trying to protect the family. I understand that. But if I'd told you, your mother knew everything. She made the choice to pay to protect Natalie from consequences. That was Helen's decision. You couldn't have changed it. I squeezed her hand. What we can do now is make sure Natalie faces what she's done. That's how we honor your mother. Angela nodded, but she was still crying. I looked back at the laptop screen. There was still one file I hadn't opened, letters.docx, the original blackmail letter, the one that had started everything. I moved the cursor to click it, but Angela spoke again. There's more, isn't there? More than just the accident. Yes, the letter, the blackmail, all of it. I checked the time on the laptop, 12:28 in the morning. We'd been at this for over half an hour, and my exhaustion was catching up with me. The words on the screen were starting to blur. We should stop, Angela said, reading my face. You need rest. I need to understand. You will. Tomorrow. But Dad, you can barely keep your eyes open. We can't make decisions like this when we're exhausted. She was right. My mind felt like it was moving through fog. The photos, the reports, Angela's confession, it was too much to process all at once. Tomorrow, I agreed. We'll go through everything tomorrow. The letter, all of it. Angela stood. I'll come by in the morning. We'll figure out our next steps. After she left, I sat alone in the study staring at the folder on my screen. 28 years of secrets contained in digital files. Photos of an accident my daughter had caused. Reports documenting her recklessness. Letters I hadn't read them yet, but I could imagine what they said. Threats. Demands. The careful construction of fear that had controlled my wife's life. Tomorrow I'd read that letter word by word. Tomorrow I'd understand exactly how Natalie had orchestrated 28 years of lies. Tomorrow I'd start building the case that would prove everything. But tonight I needed rest, because the fight ahead would take everything I had. Angela should have left. I'd told her to go home, get some rest, but neither of us could move. We sat in my study, the laptop's glow casting shadows, both knowing we wouldn't sleep until we'd seen everything. Let's get this over with, I said. I clicked on letters.docx. The file opened to reveal a scanned image of a handwritten letter. The paper looked old, slightly yellowed, the handwriting angular and precise. Dated August 30th, 1996, Mrs. Warren. Though I witnessed an incident on August 23rd at the Riverside construction site. Your daughter Natalie was responsible for a serious accident that injured a worker named Carlos Rodriguez. He suffered severe injuries. broken legs, spinal damage that will affect him for the rest of his life. Mr. Rodriguez could press charges against your daughter. Reckless endangerment. Criminal negligence. Your daughter could face jail time. Her future would be destroyed. I'm willing to keep quiet about what I saw, but silence comes with a price. Pay me $1,200 every week. Cash only. I'll contact you with instructions for the first payment. Continue paying every Friday, same amount until I tell you to stop. If you don't pay, or if you go to the police, I'll make sure Mr. Rodriguez knows exactly who caused his injuries. I'll testify against your daughter in court. I'll provide detailed statements about her carelessness, her complete disregard for safety protocols. She'll face criminal charges and civil lawsuits that will bankrupt your family. You have 48 hours to decide. I suggest you choose wisely. No signature, no return address, just a phone number at the bottom. I sat back, feeling sick. This was what Helen had received 28 years ago. This threat, these words, this impossible choice. That's extortion, Angela whispered. Yes, but it also protected Natalie. If this person really wanted to hurt her, they could have just gone to the police. They didn't need to blackmail Mom. I know. That's what's bothering me. I read the letter again. Look at the timeline. Accident happens August 23rd. This letter is dated August 30th, 7 days later. That's fast. Too fast. How did this person know Helen would pay? How did they know she wouldn't just go to the police herself? Maybe they were gambling. Extortionists don't gamble, they calculate. I scrolled down. The file contained dozens more letters spanning years. Brief messages, always the same format. Payment due Friday. Same amount. Same location. All in the same handwriting as the first letter. Or were they? I zoomed in on the first letter, then on one from 1998. The handwriting looked similar but not identical. The slant was different. The pressure on certain letters had changed. Angela, look at this. Different handwriting. She studied the screen. You think Natalie wrote the later ones herself? Fletcher admitted he wrote the first letter. But what if Natalie forged his handwriting to keep the blackmail going? Fletcher writes one letter, gets his $500, and walks away. But Natalie realizes her mother will pay to protect her. We'll keep paying. All she has to do is keep sending letters. But Mom would have recognized Natalie's handwriting eventually. Would she? These letters came in the mail. Helen never met the blackmailer face to face. And if Natalie was careful to forge Fletcher's style, I rubbed my eyes. They felt like sandpaper. We'd need handwriting analysis to prove it. How do we get that? Compare Fletcher's letter to the later ones. If they're different, we have evidence. The clock on my desk read 12:58. But not tonight. I can't think anymore. Angela stood. Dad, you need to sleep. You've barely rested since Mom's funeral. She was right. My whole body ached. My mind kept circling without making progress. But something kept nagging at me. The address, I said suddenly. The letter is addressed to Helen, to Mrs. Warren, at our home address. How did the writer know her name? How did they know where we lived? Angela thought about it. Public records. Maybe, but why Helen specifically? Why not address it to both of us? Why not send it to Natalie herself? I shook my head. Unless Natalie told the writer exactly who to contact and where to send it. So she orchestrated the whole thing. From the beginning. The accident, the letter, the 28 years of payments. I closed the laptop. But I need proof. Real proof. Not just suspicions. Angela moved toward the door. Tomorrow. We'll figure it out tomorrow. But right now, you need to rest. I wanted to argue. Wanted to keep digging, keep searching for the piece that would make everything clear. But my body was betraying me. I could barely keep my eyes open. Tomorrow, I agreed. After Angela left, I sat alone in the darkened study. The laptop was closed, but I could still see that letter in my mind. Those threatening words. That calculated cruelty. Something didn't add up. The timeline felt wrong. Too fast, too calculated. 7 days from accident to extortion letter, most criminals would be cautious. This felt planned. The tone felt staged. Not angry, not emotional. Professional, businesslike. Like someone reading from a script. And the address. The writer knew Helen's full name, knew our home address, knew to target her specifically, instead of Natalie, or both of us. That level of detail didn't come from witnessing an accident. It came from inside knowledge, inside our family. I thought about Natalie at 20 years old, scared after causing the accident, desperate to avoid consequences. She'd gone to Fletcher for help, paid him $500 to write that first letter. But then what she'd seen, how easily her mother had complied, seen how Helen would sacrifice anything to protect her daughter. And Natalie had realized something: this could continue. As long as the letters kept coming, the money would keep flowing. All she had to do was learn to forge Fletcher's handwriting. Send 1 letter a week. Keep Helen terrified and paying. For 28 years. My own daughter had done this. Had looked at her mother's fear and seen opportunity, had turned love into a weapon and wielded it for nearly 3 decades. Tomorrow I'd analyze every word of those letters, every detail, every inconsistency. Tomorrow I'd prove what I already knew in my gut. But tonight, exhaustion was winning. My brain was too fogged to see clearly. The pieces were there, scattered across everything I'd learned. But I couldn't put them together yet. Tomorrow, with fresh eyes and a rested mind, it would all become clear. It had to. I lasted 15 minutes in bed before giving up. My mind wouldn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that letter. Those calculated threats. That handwriting that looked right but felt wrong. At 1 in the morning, I got up and went back to my study. If I couldn't sleep, I'd use the time. I'd find the proof I needed. I opened the laptop and pulled up letters.docx, dozens of letters spanning 28 years, all supposedly written by the same anonymous blackmailer who'd witnessed the accident. But were they? I opened 6 letters side by side on the screen, arranging them chronologically: 1996, 1997, 1998, 2005, 2015, 2024. Then I zoomed in. The first letter, Fletcher's letter from August 1996, had distinctive handwriting. Angular, precise. Heavy pressure that left deep impressions on the paper. The capital N in Natalie slanted sharply to the right. The lowercase t's were crossed with short, firm strokes. I looked at the second letter from April 1997. Nearly identical. The same angular style, the same heavy pressure. Either Fletcher had written it, or someone had copied his handwriting very carefully. The third letter from November 1998 was where things started to change. The handwriting was still similar, but the pressure was lighter. The capital N was more vertical, less slanted. The T-crosses were longer, more casual. Small differences. Subtle enough that Helen might not have noticed if she wasn't looking for them. But they were there. By 2005, the changes were more pronounced. The letters still mimicked Fletcher's angular style, but the writer's natural hand was bleeding through. The spacing between words was wider. The loops on the lowercase g's were rounder. By 2015, whoever was writing these letters had stopped trying so hard to copy Fletcher's style. The handwriting was still similar enough to avoid suspicion, but it was clearly a different hand. And the final letter from September 2024, the last one Helen had received before she passed away, barely resembled Fletcher's original handwriting at all. I sat back and rubbed my eyes. Natalie had written these letters. Maybe not the first few. Fletcher might have written several before taking his money and disappearing. But at some point, Natalie had taken over. She'd learned to forge his handwriting well enough to fool her mother, and she'd kept it going for decades. I pulled out a notepad and started calculating. 28 years from August 1996 to September 2024. 52 weeks per year. That was 1,456 weeks. 1,456 letters, assuming Fletcher had only written the first few. Let's say Fletcher wrote 10 letters, maybe 15 at most. That would mean Natalie had written more than 1,400 letters herself. 1,400 threats to her own mother. 1,400 demands for $1,200. 1,446 times $1,200. $1,735,200. Nearly $2 million extorted from her own mother over 28 years, one threatening letter at a time. I thought about Helen, about the woman I'd been married to for 48 years, the woman who'd kept this secret from me for nearly 3 decades. When had she realized it was Natalie? Not at first, surely. The early letters would have terrified her, a stranger threatening to expose her daughter, demanding payment to stay silent. Helen would have paid immediately, desperate to protect Natalie from jail. But after a year, 5 years, 10 years, at some point, Helen must have started to suspect. The handwriting changing slightly, the demands never escalating, never asking for more, the payments continuing long after most extortion schemes would have ended. Maybe she'd confronted Natalie. Maybe Natalie had admitted it, or maybe Helen had just known without being told. A mother's intuition, recognizing her own daughter's cruelty. And Helen had kept paying anyway. Because that's what mothers do. They protect their children even when those children don't deserve protection. Even when that protection costs everything. I thought about Helen's final weeks. The way she'd organized her papers so carefully. The way she'd closed accounts, put things in order. The final entry in the blue notebook, done. She'd known she was dying, and maybe she'd been relieved. After 28 years of carrying this burden, death meant freedom. No more letters, no more payments, no more protecting a daughter who'd turned love into a weapon. My throat tightened. Tears blurred my vision. I should have seen it. I whispered to the empty room. I should have known something was wrong. But I'd been blind. Too trusting, too focused on work, on providing, on being the stable foundation, while Helen handled everything else. I'd let her carry this alone because I'd never imagined she was carrying anything at all. "I'm sorry," I said. "Helen, I'm so sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. Helen was gone. Natalie had stolen 28 years of her life, nearly $2 million of her inheritance. And any peace she might have had in her final years. And Natalie had done it all while wearing a $35,000 watch and living a lifestyle she'd built on her mother's suffering. This wasn't just theft. It wasn't just blackmail. It was systematic emotional abuse spanning nearly 3 decades. It was elder abuse. It was fraud and forgery and extortion, all wrapped up in the worst kind of betrayal, a daughter destroying her mother for money. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness. The evidence was clear. Natalie had orchestrated this from the beginning. She'd caused the accident, convinced Fletcher to write that first letter, then taken over, and turned her mother's fear into a cash machine that ran for 28 years. Tomorrow, no today, in just a few hours, I'd take the next step. Fletcher had mentioned that Carlos Rodriguez was still alive, living at Clearview Care Center. I needed to talk to him. Needed to hear his side of the story, understand the full scope of what had happened in 1996. And then I'd bring everything to the police. The letters, the banking records, the forged will, the testimony from Fletcher and Carlos. Everything. Natalie thought she'd gotten away with it. thought that Helen dying meant the secret was buried forever. She was wrong. I'd make sure of it. At 2 in the morning, I finally went back to bed. This time, exhaustion overwhelmed my racing thoughts. I slept hard and dreamless for 4 hours. When I woke at 6, the sun was just beginning to rise. I felt different, clearer. The fog of grief and confusion had lifted, replaced by cold determination. I showered, dressed, and made coffee. By 6:30, I was in my car driving toward Clearview Care Center. Carlos Rodriguez deserved to know the truth about who had destroyed his life 28 years ago, and I needed to hear his story, the final piece of the puzzle that would prove what my daughter had done. The fight was just beginning. Clearview Care Center sat at the edge of town, a low brick building with narrow windows and a parking lot that needed repaving. I pulled in just after 7, the morning sun casting long shadows across cracked asphalt. Inside, the lobby smelled like disinfectant and old carpet. A nurse sat behind the reception desk, typing on a computer. "I'm here to see Carlos Rodriguez," I said. She looked up over her reading glasses. "Are you family?" "No. I need to talk to him about something from a long time ago. It's important." She hesitated, then picked up the phone. After a brief conversation in Spanish, she pointed down the hallway. "Room 114. He says he'll see you." I found the room and knocked softly. "Come in," a voice called. Carlos Rodriguez sat in a wheelchair by the window, morning light illuminating a face weathered by decades of hard work. He was maybe 60, with graying hair and the kind of calloused hands that spoke of a lifetime of manual labor. "Mr. Rodriguez, my name is Philip Warren. I need to talk to you about the accident in 1996 at the Riverside construction site." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something darker. "That was a long time ago. Why are you asking about it now?" "It's complicated." I pulled up the room's only chair. "Can you tell me what you remember?" He stared out the window for a long moment. "August Negentien Zasenagentig. I was working 3rd-level scaffolding. Good crew. I'd been in construction 15 years by then." He gestured at his wheelchair. The whole structure collapsed. I fell 20 feet. Both my legs broke on impact. My spine was damaged. I spent 6 months in the hospital. Another year in physical therapy. His voice turned bitter. The doctors said I was lucky I could still move my arms. "What caused the collapse?" "They said someone knocked the support beam loose. A young woman who wasn't supposed to be up there. Not wearing safety gear. She bumped it and everything came down. I never saw her face. Never got her name. The company investigated, but she was gone. Case closed." My chest tightened. "And your life after Tsukint? Over." I was 32 years old with a wife and a 5-year-old daughter. Suddenly, I couldn't provide for them anymore. Disability payments barely covered rent. My wife had to work 2 jobs. Medical bills piled up. My daughter grew up watching her mother break herself to keep us fed. He shook his head. "It was hard. Really hard. I thought about Natalie at 20 walking away from that construction site without looking back while this man's life crumbled. But then," Carlos said, and his expression softened. "Maybe a year after the accident, something changed. A woman started visiting me. Mrs. Warren. Helen Warren." My breath caught. "So my wife Helen came here to see you. You're her husband." His eyes widened. "I didn't know. She never said. She came. Once a month at first, then every few months. She'd sit with me, ask how I was doing, how my family was managing. She'd ask about my daughter, my wife's health, and she'd bring money. $500, sometimes more, every visit without fail. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process what I was hearing. For years she did this," Carlos continued. 10 years, 15, I lost track. The last time I saw her was maybe 6 months ago. She looked tired that day. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was fine. Just getting older. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. That money paid for my daughter's college. It covered my wife's medical expenses when she got sick. It kept us from losing our house. I don't know why she did it. I thought maybe she worked for the construction company or some charity organization. But I never asked. I was just grateful. She never explained why. No. She'd just say she wanted to help, that she'd heard about my accident and thought I deserved better. She never asked for anything in return, never wanted recognition. Carlos's eyes glistened. She was the kindest person I've ever met. An angel, truly. Tears burned behind my eyes. Helen had been paying Natalie $1,200 every week to keep quiet about causing this accident. And at the same time, she'd been giving Carlos $500 a month, her own money from her own pocket, to help ease the suffering that same accident had caused. She'd carried both burdens, the blackmail and the guilt. She'd protected her daughter while also trying to make amends for what that daughter had done. Mr. Warren, Carlos looked concerned. Are you all right? Did I say something wrong? No. I wiped my eyes. You said everything right. Thank you for telling me about her. Is she well? Can you thank her for me? I've been meaning to write her a letter. She passed away, I said quietly. A few weeks ago. Carlos's hand went to his chest. He crossed himself. Dios mío, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. She'll be in my prayers. Please know that she made such a difference in my life, in my family's life. I stood to leave my legs unsteady. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for telling me this. Mr. Warren, can I ask, why are you asking about the accident now? I looked at this man whose life had been destroyed by my daughter's carelessness, who'd suffered for 28 years while Natalie wore expensive watches and lived a life built on stolen money. Because it's time for the truth to come out, I said. All of it. Outside, I sat in my car in the parking lot and let the tears come. Helen had been a victim of her own daughter's cruelty for 28 years, but she'd also been a hero to a man whose life was destroyed by that same daughter. She'd carried both burdens, the blackmail and the guilt, and tried to make amends for a crime she didn't commit. She'd used nearly $2 million of her inheritance. But not just to pay off Natalie. She'd also used tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands over the years, to help Carlos and his family. Money she could have kept for herself. Money she could have told me about so we could have helped together. But she'd done it alone, quietly, without asking for recognition or forgiveness. That was the woman I'd married. That was the woman I'd lost. And I was going to make sure her sacrifice meant something. Natalie thought she'd gotten away with it, thought that Helen's death meant the secret was buried forever. She was wrong. I was going to expose every lie, every theft, every moment of cruelty. I was going to make sure Natalie faced every consequence she'd avoided for 28 years. Not for revenge, for justice, for Helen. I drove home from Clearview in a fog of grief and fury. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the fog had cleared. What remained was cold, focused determination. I called Angela as soon as I walked through the door. I need you to come over. Now. It's time. We're going to stop Natalie. She arrived within 20 minutes. I was waiting at the dining table, the blue notebook open in front of me. Dad. Angela's eyes were red. She'd been crying. What happened at the nursing home? I met Carlos Rodriguez, the man whose life Natalie destroyed. I kept my voice steady. Your mother was helping him. For years. She visited him regularly, gave him money every month. She was trying to make amends for what Natalie did. Angela sank into a chair. Mom never said anything. She carried it alone, all of it. But we're not going to let that be for nothing. I stood and walked to my study, returning with armfuls of documents. We're going to build a case, and we're going to make sure Natalie faces every consequence she's avoided. I spread everything across the table: the blue notebook, the banking records from Mrs. Peterson, printouts of the laptop files, the accident photos, the reports, the letters, the forged will, Fletcher's contact information, notes about Carlos Rodriguez at Clearview Care Center. Angela stared at the evidence. This is overwhelming. It's 28 years of crimes, I said. Blackmail, extortion, fraud, forgery, elder abuse. We have proof of all of it. Now we need to organize it so the law can do its job. Where do we start? With Charles Newman, then the police. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. He answered on the third ring. Charles, it's Philip Warren. I need your help. It's urgent. Of course. What's happened? I took a deep breath. Well, my daughter Natalie has been blackmailing my late wife for 28 years. Nearly $2 million. She also forged my will to make herself sole beneficiary. I have extensive evidence. I need to know how to proceed legally. Silence on the other end. Then, Philip, this is beyond civil court. This is criminal. Elder abuse, extortion, fraud, forgery. These are serious felonies. We need law enforcement involved immediately. I know. I'm calling Sheriff Bradshaw next. But I wanted your guidance first. Good. Here's what we do. Organize all your evidence chronologically. Prepare a written statement detailing everything you know and when you learned it. I'll file a motion to contest the forged will in probate court first thing Monday morning. But the criminal charges, that's the sheriff's domain. Will you coordinate with him? Absolutely. This is going to move fast once we start. Be prepared. After hanging up with Newman, I called the sheriff's office. Tom Bradshaw had been sheriff for 15 years. I'd met him a few times at community events, but we weren't close. Still, his reputation was solid. Sheriff Bradshaw speaking. Sheriff, this is Philip Warren. I need to report multiple felonies committed by my daughter against my late wife and myself. I heard papers rustling. Mr. Warren, that's a serious allegation. Can you give me an overview? I summarized as concisely as I could. The 1996 accident. The blackmail letters. 28 years of payments totaling over $1.7 million. The forged will. The evidence I'd gathered. Bradshaw listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Warren, if what you're describing is accurate, we're looking at multiple felonies. Extortion, elder abuse, fraud, forgery. Possibly more. I'll need to review all your evidence personally. Can you come to my office tomorrow afternoon, say 2 o'clock? I'll be there. Bring everything. Documents, photos, statements, timelines. I want this case airtight. If we're going to arrest someone, I need to be absolutely certain the charges will stick. Understood. One more thing, Sheriff. Is it legal in Michigan to record a conversation if one party consents? Yes. Michigan is a one-party consent state. Why? Because I'm thinking we should give my daughter a chance to explain herself. Invite her over, confront her with the evidence, and record her response. That's not a bad idea, Bradshaw said carefully. But I want to review everything first. If we do set up something like that, I want to be involved. We'll discuss it tomorrow. After I hung up, Angela was staring at me. You want to confront Natalie here, with the sheriff present, with a lawyer, with everything recorded. I sat down across from her. She thinks she's gotten away with it. She thinks Helen's death buried all the secrets. We're going to let her believe that until it's too late. What if she runs? She won't. She's too arrogant. She filed a forged will 3 months ago. She's not thinking about running, she's thinking about how to get more money. Angela wrapped her arms around herself. When? Monday, probably. After I meet with the sheriff tomorrow, and he reviews everything. We'll call Natalie Sunday night, tell her we found something in Helen's papers that we need to discuss. Something about the estate. She won't be able to resist. And then we show her everything. The notebook, the letters, the forged will, the handwriting analysis showing she wrote most of those blackmail letters herself. And we watch her try to explain it away while the sheriff listens to every word. We spent the rest of the afternoon organizing the evidence. I created a timeline on legal paper starting with the August 1996 accident and ending with Helen's final payment in September 2024. 28 years, documented week by week in Helen's careful handwriting. Angela made copies of everything, the banking records, the laptop files, the letters. We put the originals in one folder and the copies in another. Everything needed to be perfect. Nothing could be left to chance. By 5 o'clock, we were done. The dining table looked like a prosecutor's office. Stacks of documents chronologically organized. Witness information. Financial records showing exactly where the money had gone. Letters in Natalie's progressively less disguised handwriting. It was all there. 28 years of crime laid out in black and white. Angela stood and stretched. What do we do now? Now. I looked at the evidence we'd assembled. Now we wait. Tomorrow I give all this to the sheriff. He'll tell us how to proceed. Probably Monday we spring the trap. The trap. Yes, we invite Natalie here. We confront her, and we let her destroy herself with her own lies. Angela hugged me. I'm scared. I know. So am I. I held her tight. But this is for your mother. Everything we're doing is to make sure Helen's sacrifice wasn't in vain. After Angela left, I sat alone with the evidence spread across my table. Tomorrow, I'd hand it over to law enforcement. By Monday, Natalie would be facing charges that could send her to prison for years. Part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. My own daughter. The little girl I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with homework. The woman who'd looked me in the eye at Helen's funeral without flinching. But that little girl was gone, if she'd ever really existed at all. What remained was someone who'd destroyed her mother's peace for 28 years, someone who'd stolen nearly $2 million, someone who'd forged legal documents to steal even more, and someone who was about to face justice. The trap was set. Now we wait. The envelope arrived at 9 o'clock Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen staring at a cold cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Angela had stayed the night sleeping in her old room upstairs, and I heard her footsteps on the stairs as I walked to the front door. A courier stood on the porch, clipboard in hand. Philip Warren, that's me. Sign here, please. I signed without thinking. He handed me a thick manila envelope embossed with the seal of the Kent County Probate Court, then turned and walked back to his van. I stood in the doorway, the envelope heavy in my hands, and felt my stomach drop. Angela appeared beside me. Dad, what is it? I didn't answer. I tore open the envelope and pulled out the papers inside. Petition for appointment of conservator of estate. The words swam in front of my eyes. I scanned the document, my hands shaking. Petitioner Natalie Marie Patterson respectfully requests the court appoint a conservator to manage the estate of Philip James Warren, age 70, on grounds that said individual is unable to manage his financial affairs due to advanced age, recent bereavement, and diminished mental capacity. I read it twice. Then I looked at Angela. She's trying to take everything, I said quietly. Angela grabbed the papers from my hands and read them herself. Her face went pale. This says there's a hearing on Wednesday. That's only 3 days. 72 hours, I said. My voice sounded hollow. She's claiming I'm incompetent, that I can't manage my own money. If the court agrees, she'll control everything, the house, the pension, Helen's inheritance. And she'll use that power to bury the evidence and stop me from going to the police. Angela's eyes were wide. Can she do that? I don't know. I pulled out my phone. But I'm going to find out. Charles Newman answered on the second ring. Philip, I wasn't expecting to hear from you until Monday. Natalie filed for conservatorship, I said. The hearing is Wednesday. There was a long pause. Then Newman swore under his breath. She's moving faster than I thought. Can you bring the paperwork to my office? I need to see exactly what we're dealing with. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Newman's office was on Wealthy Street in a brick building that smelled like old books and furniture polish. He met us at the door, his reading glasses perched on his nose, and led us to a conference room lined with law books. Angela and I sat across from him while he read through Natalie's petition, his expression growing darker with every page. Finally, he set the papers down and looked at me. This is serious, Philip. If the court grants this petition, Natalie becomes your conservator. She'll have legal authority to manage your finances, pay your bills, and make decisions about your property. You'll need her permission to access your own money. Can she do that? Angela asked. My father is completely competent. The burden of proof is on Natalie, Newman said. She has to convince the judge that Philip can't manage his affairs. But the problem is, she's built a plausible case. Your father is 70 years old. Your mother just died. Natalie's lawyer will argue that Philip is vulnerable, grief-stricken, and making irrational decisions like accusing his own daughter of extortion. I felt a surge of anger. It's not irrational if it's true. I know that, Newman said, but we have to prove it, and we have 72 hours to do it. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. Here's what we need. First, a medical evaluation. I'll arrange for you to see Dr. Sarah Mitchell tomorrow morning. She's a cognitive specialist. She'll run tests to prove you're mentally sharp. Second, we need to present the evidence of Natalie's crimes. If we can show the judge that Natalie has a financial motive to silence you, it undermines her credibility. Third, we need witnesses. Fletcher and Carlos Rodriguez. Both of them can corroborate your story. Angela leaned forward. What if Natalie wins? Newman's expression was grim. Then Philip loses control of his assets. Natalie can block any legal action against her. She can sell the house, drain the accounts, and walk away clean. And there's nothing Philip can do about it. I felt the weight of those words settle over me. 28 years of Helen's suffering. $1,747,200. My wife's silence. My daughter's betrayal. If Natalie won, it would all be for nothing. Then we don't let her win, I said. We spent the rest of Sunday preparing. Angela and I returned to the house and spread the evidence across the dining room table. The blue notebook, the banking records, the laptop files, the forged will, handwriting samples from 1996 and 2024. Photographs of Natalie's $35,000 watch. Everything we had gathered over the past week. Newman called at noon. I spoke with Dennis Fletcher. He's willing to testify. He'll be at the courthouse Wednesday morning. What about Carlos Rodriguez? I'm working on it. The staff at Clearview Care Center said he's willing to provide a written statement, but he's not strong enough to appear in person. I'll have it notarized and submit it as evidence. Good. To Diosa and Philip, your medical evaluation is scheduled for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Don't be late. I won't. By 6 o'clock, the dining room looked like a war room. Evidence binders lined the table. Post-it notes marked key documents. Angela had created a timeline on a whiteboard tracing Natalie's crimes from August 1996 to September 2024. 28 years, 1,504 weeks, $1,200 every Friday. I stood at the head of the table and stared at the evidence. Helen had carried this burden alone. She had paid Natalie every week for 28 years to protect her, to keep her out of prison, to shield her from the consequences of her crime. And now Natalie was trying to take everything. Angela came to stand beside me. "We'll win, Dad. The truth is on our side." I wanted to believe her, but I knew the legal system didn't always favor the truth. It favored whoever had the best lawyer, the best evidence, the best story. And Natalie had a good story. A grieving widower, an elderly man, a daughter concerned for her father's well-being. I had the truth. But would it be enough? At 8 o'clock, Angela went upstairs to bed. I stayed in the study reviewing the evidence binders one more time. Every receipt, every letter, every photograph. Helen's face stared back at me from a framed picture on the desk. She was smiling the way she used to smile before the weight of Natalie's crime settled over her, before she started making those trips to the bank every Friday morning, before she became a prisoner in her own life. I closed the binder and looked at the calendar on the wall. Monday, medical evaluation. Tuesday, final preparation. Wednesday, the hearing. 72 hours, 3 days to expose the truth. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. "I won't let her win, Helen," I whispered. "I promise." The house was silent. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows. 3 days to expose the truth. The phone rang at 6:15 Monday evening. I was in the study with Angela reviewing the medical evaluation results from Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I had passed every cognitive test that morning. The written report would be ready Tuesday, in time for Wednesday's hearing. I glanced at the screen. The name made my stomach tighten. Trevor Patterson, Natalie's husband, a man who had never called me. Not once in 10 years. I answered. "Trevor." "Philip." His voice was shaken. "I need to talk to you. Right now." "What's wrong?" "I found something. Documents, letters, cash." He paused. "Is Natalie a criminal?" My pulse quickened. "Where are you?" "Home. Natalie's at her office until 9. Come now." 20 minutes later, we pulled into the driveway on Rosewood Avenue. Trevor opened the door before we could knock. His shirt was untucked, his eyes red. "Come in." The dining room table was covered with papers and a cardboard box. Trevor gestured toward it with a trembling hand. "I came home early from Chicago. My flight got canceled. I was looking for business documents in Natalie's office and noticed her filing cabinet had a new lock. I broke it open." He pulled out a thick envelope filled with $100 bills. $100,000, cash, hidden in her closet safe. Angela stared. I felt cold. Trevor handed me a folder. Offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, Switzerland. Over $400,000 transferred in small amounts over 10 years. I opened it. The statements showed regular deposits, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, always just under reporting thresholds. And these. Trevor's voice shook as he handed me another folder. Draft letters, dozens of them, all in Natalie's handwriting. I pulled out the top sheet, lined notebook paper. Natalie's cursive, Mrs. Warren. "This is a reminder that your payment is due this Friday. You know what will happen if you stop paying. Do not test me." The date, March 12th, 2015. I flipped through the stack. More letters, different years, all threats, all demanding $1,200, all in Natalie's handwriting. My hands shook. Angela read over my shoulder and went pale. Trevor stood across from us, arms crossed. "Someone needs to tell me what's going on." Now. I took a breath. Then I told him everything. The accident in 1996, Natalie's recklessness, the injured worker, Dennis Fletcher's first letter, Helen's decision to pay $1,200 every week for 28 years, the blue notebook, the $1,747,200, the forged will, the conservatorship petition. Trevor listened in silence. When I finished, he sat down heavily. She's been lying to me for our entire marriage. You didn't know, I said. No. His voice was hollow. I thought we had a good life. I never thought she was... He stared at the letters. Your wife paid her own daughter for 28 years. Yes. And now Natalie's trying to take control of your assets so you can't expose her. Yes. Trevor walked to the window and stared out at the darkening street, fists clenched. I won't protect her. Not after this. At 8:30, I called Charles Newman. Philip, how's the prep going? We have new evidence. A lot of it. I explained what Trevor had found. Newman listened without interrupting. Trevor's willing to provide all of this voluntarily. Yes. And testify. I looked at Trevor. He nodded. Yes. Then we have everything we need, Newman said. Offshore accounts prove she was hiding extorted money. The draft letters prove she wrote them herself. The cash ties her directly to the crime. And Trevor's testimony destroys her credibility. I'll file a motion Tuesday morning to introduce this evidence and subpoena Trevor as a witness. With this, Natalie's petition will be dismissed, and she'll face criminal charges by week's end. Relief flooded through me. Thank you, Charles. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get through Wednesday. But Philip, we're going to win. At 10 o'clock, Trevor packed the documents and cash into the box and handed it to me. Take it. All of it. Use it to make sure she pays for what she did. What about you? Angela asked. Trevor's expression hardened. I'll file for divorce. I'm not staying married to a criminal. He walked us to the door. I turned back. I'm sorry, Trevor. I know this isn't easy. He shook his head. You don't have anything to be sorry for. I should have seen it. All those years, and I never questioned where the money came from. You trusted her, I said. Yeah. His voice was bitter. I did. Angela and I drove home in silence. The box sat in the back seat. I kept glancing at it in the rearview mirror. 28 years of lies. 28 years of extortion. And now the truth was laid bare. When we pulled into the driveway, Angela turned to me. Do you think Trevor's okay? No, but he will be, eventually. She nodded. We sat for a moment, neither moving. Dad, Angela said quietly. We're going to win. You know that, right? I looked at the house. Helen's house, the one she had fought to keep, and thought about the blue notebook, the banking records, the letters, the offshore accounts. I thought about Trevor's devastated face and Fletcher's guilt and Carlos Rodriguez's gratitude. I thought about Helen alone every Friday morning for 28 years, walking into that bank and withdrawing $1,200 to protect the daughter who had betrayed her. Yes, I said. We're going to win. Inside, I set the box on the dining room table and opened it one more time. The draft letters stared up at me, Natalie's handwriting unmistakable. The offshore account statements. The cash. 48 hours until Wednesday's hearing. The truth was no longer hidden. Now it would be heard. If you're still with me, drop a comment below. What do you think will happen next? Will Natalie face justice, or will she find a way out before we continue? I need to be honest, the next part of this story, includes some fictionalized elements for dramatic effect. The core message about betrayal secrets and justice is real, but certain details may be dramatized. If you'd rather stop here, I understand. But if you want to see how this ends, how the trap closes and justice is served, stay with me. Let's finish this together. Tuesday morning, I sat across from Charles Newman in his office and listened to him outline the plan. "We need more than documents," Newman said. "We need Natalie to incriminate herself, on the record." "How?" I asked. "Invite her to your house tonight. Tell her you want to negotiate. She thinks she has the upper hand with the conservatorship petition. She'll come." Angela leaned forward. "And then what?" "We record the conversation. Michigan is a one-party consent state. Philip can legally record without her knowledge. If she says anything incriminating, admits to the extortion, threatens, Philip reveals knowledge of the offshore accounts, we'll have it on tape." I hesitated. What if she doesn't say anything?" "She will," Newman said. "Natalie's arrogant. She thinks she's won. Arrogant people make mistakes." Sheriff Tom Bradshaw, who had been standing by the window, turned to face us. "I'll be there as a witness, hidden but present. If she makes any threats or admissions, I'll hear them firsthand." "Harim?" I looked at Angela. She nodded. "All right," I said. "Let's do it." At noon, I called Natalie. She answered on the third ring. "Dad, I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice calm. "About the hearing tomorrow. I'd like to negotiate." There was a pause. Then she said, "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Come to the house tonight. 6 o'clock. Another pause. I could almost hear her calculating. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll be there." She hung up. I set the phone down and looked at Angela. "She's coming." At 5 o'clock, Sheriff Bradshaw and Charles Newman arrived at the house. Bradshaw carried a small digital recorder, which he placed on the bookshelf in the living room, angled toward the couch where Natalie would sit. Newman checked my phone to make sure the recording app was working. "Backup," he said, "just in case." Angela brought coffee. We stood in the kitchen reviewing the plan one more time. "Keep her talking," Newman said. "Ask about the money. Ask about the letters. Let her reveal herself. Don't accuse her directly, just guide the conversation." "And if she doesn't take the bait?" I asked. "She will," Bradshaw said. "I've seen it 100 times. People like Natalie can't help themselves. They need to gloat." Newman and Bradshaw moved into the study, leaving the door slightly ajar. Angela went upstairs. The house fell silent. I sat down in the armchair across from the couch and waited. At 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Natalie stood on the porch, dressed in a dark suit and heels, carrying a leather briefcase. She looked polished, professional, and utterly confident. "Dad," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Natalie." She walked into the living room and set her briefcase on the coffee table. Then she sat down on the couch, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. "So," she said, "you wanted to negotiate." I sat down across from her. "I've been thinking about your petition. Maybe we can work something out." Natalie smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "I'm glad you're being reasonable. I know this is hard, but it's for your own good. You're not thinking clearly." "What makes you think that?" "You've been making wild accusations, paranoid delusions about Mom's money. It's concerning." I kept my voice steady. The $1,200 she withdrew every week for 28 years. Natalie's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then she recovered. Mom had her own reasons for managing her money the way she did. It's not your concern. $1,747,200, I said. Where did it go, Natalie? Her eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. The offshore accounts, the cash in your safe, the letters. Natalie stood abruptly. What letters? I stayed seated calm. The ones you wrote, in your handwriting, demanding money from Mom every week. She stared at me, her jaw tight. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Natalie's mask slipped. The polished confidence cracked, and beneath it I saw anger, raw and cold. Even if you could, she said, her voice low, it doesn't matter. By tomorrow afternoon, I'll have control of your assets and you'll be declared incompetent. Game over, Dad. Is that what this is to you? I asked quietly. A game. It's survival. Her voice was sharp, now bitter. Mom should have kept her mouth shut. But she's gone now, and you're next. The words hung in the air. I felt something inside me go cold. Not anger, not grief, just clarity. You're threatening me, I said. Natalie realized what she'd said. Her face went pale. I didn't mean, yes, you did. She grabbed her briefcase and turned toward the door. See you in court tomorrow, Dad. Enjoy your last night of freedom. She walked out, slamming the door behind her. For a moment, the house was silent. Then Sheriff Bradshaw and Charles Newman emerged from the study. Bradshaw held up the digital recorder. We got it all, he said. Newman looked at me. That was more than enough. She admitted to the extortion. She threatened you. And she revealed her motive. Tomorrow, when we play this recording in court, the judge will hear exactly what kind of person Natalie is. Angela came downstairs, her face pale. Is it over? Not yet, I said. But tomorrow it will be. Bradshaw pocketed the recorder. I'll file a report tonight. By the time the hearing starts tomorrow, there'll be a criminal investigation open against Natalie. The judge will know. Newman nodded. And Trevor's testimony, combined with the offshore accounts and this recording, will bury her conservatorship petition. She won't just lose, she'll be arrested. They left a few minutes later. Angela made tea, but neither of us drank it. We sat in the living room, staring at the empty couch where Natalie had sat. She really said it, Angela whispered. She threatened you. Yes. She's been doing this for 28 years, and she doesn't even feel guilty. No, I said. She doesn't. At 10 o'clock, I went upstairs, but I didn't sleep. I sat by the window and looked out at the dark street. Somewhere out there, Natalie was going to bed, confident she would win tomorrow, confident she had outmaneuvered me. She didn't know about Trevor's discovery. She didn't know about the recording. She didn't know that Sheriff Bradshaw was already building a case against her. Tomorrow, she would walk into that courtroom expecting victory, and she would find justice instead. I thought about Helen, about 28 years of silence, about $1,200 every Friday morning, about a mother's love twisted into a weapon. Tomorrow it would end. The trap was set, waiting for its prey. Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock. Kent County Probate Court. I walked into the courtroom with Angela and Charles Newman. The room smelled like old wood and floor polish. Natalie was already seated at the defendant's table with her attorney, Kevin Larson. She looked calm, confident. She still thought she would win. Trevor sat in the back row, alone. When Natalie glanced at him, he looked away. Judge Margaret Holloway entered. We rose. She took her seat and opened the file in front of her. This is a hearing on the petition for conservatorship, filed by Natalie Marie Patterson regarding Philip James Warren. Mr. Larson, you may proceed. Larson stood. Your Honor, Mr. Warren is 70 years old and recently bereaved. He's making irrational accusations against his own daughter and needs a conservator to protect his financial interests. Judge Holloway turned to Newman. Mr. Newman. Newman rose. Your Honor, Mr. Warren is fully competent. This petition is frivolous and criminally motivated. I have substantial evidence to present. The judge nodded. Proceed. Newman laid the evidence on the table systematically. Exhibit a Helen Warren's notebook, 28 years of weekly entries documenting $1,200 withdrawals. Exhibit B banking records from First National Bank. Total withdrawals $1,747,200. Final account balance $12.83. Exhibit C laptop files recovered from Mrs. Warren's computer, including accident reports from 1996, blackmail letters, and photographs. Exhibit D offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, containing over $400,000 discovered by Mr. Trevor Patterson in his wife's files. Exhibit E $100,000 in cash, also discovered by Mr. Patterson. Exhibit F draft blackmail letters in Miss Patterson's handwriting. Exhibit G A forged will filed in July while Mrs. Warren was still alive. Judge Holloway examined each document carefully. The courtroom was silent except for the rustling of paper. Mr. Newman, are you prepared to present witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. I call Trevor Patterson. Trevor walked to the stand and was sworn in. Newman approached. Mr. Patterson, how did you discover these documents? Trevor's voice was steady but strained. I came home early from a business trip Monday afternoon. I found a locked filing cabinet in my wife's office. I broke it open. Inside were offshore account statements, cash, and dozens of letters in Natalie's handwriting. Blackmail letters demanding money from Mrs. Warren. And what did you do with this evidence? I contacted Mr. Warren immediately and provided everything to him and to law enforcement. I had no knowledge of my wife's crimes until that moment. Natalie stared at Trevor, her face pale. Larson stood to cross-examine, but Trevor's testimony held firm. Newman thanked him and turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd also like to enter into evidence a recording made Tuesday evening at Mr. Warren's home. Michigan is a one-party consent state, and Mr. Warren was a participant in the conversation. He played the recording. Natalie's voice filled the courtroom. By tomorrow afternoon, I'll have control of your assets and you'll be declared incompetent. Game over, Dad. Mom should have kept her mouth shut, but she's gone now, and you're next. The silence that followed was deafening. Larson leaped to his feet. Your Honor, that recording is admissible, Judge Holloway said coldly. She turned to Natalie. Ms. Patterson, do you have anything to say? Natalie's hands trembled. That's out of context. My father is lying. He's... Enough. The judge's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. I've reviewed the evidence, the offshore accounts, the forged will, the draft letters in your handwriting, the witness testimony from your own husband, and now this recording in which you admit to extortion and threaten your father. She set down her gavel. The petition for conservatorship is denied. Furthermore, I am ordering Sheriff Bradshaw to take Ms. Patterson into custody immediately. Sheriff Bradshaw stepped forward. Natalie stood, her face white. Ms. Patterson, Bradshaw said, you're under arrest for extortion, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and money laundering. He read her rights as he placed the handcuffs on her wrists. Natalie turned to look at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Dad, she whispered. Please. I said nothing. She was led out of the courtroom. The doors closed behind her. Late November, 4 weeks later. Natalie was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Her assets were seized. Trevor filed for divorce and moved to Ohio. He sent me a brief letter. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I forgave him. He didn't know. On a cold November afternoon, Angela and I stood at Helen's grave. The cemetery was quiet. Leaves covered the ground in shades of gold and red. I placed flowers on the headstone and knelt down. I understand now, I said quietly. You weren't weak, Helen. You were the strongest person I ever knew. You carried this burden for 28 years. You sacrificed everything to protect her. My voice broke. I'm sorry you had to do it alone, but it's over now. She can't hurt anyone anymore. Angela knelt beside me and placed her hand on my shoulder. Our mom loved us more than her own life. I nodded, tears running down my face. A week later, Angela showed me a bank account statement. Helen had opened it years ago in Angela's name and saved $50,000 over time. There was a note tucked inside the envelope. For Angela. Follow your dreams. Love, Mom. Angela used the money to open a small coffee shop in downtown Grand Rapids. She named it Helen's Place. I visited on opening day. The shop was warm and bright, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and pastries. Angela worked behind the counter, smiling at customers. She brought me a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. Mom would have loved this, she said. She would have loved seeing you happy, I replied. That evening, I sat in the study and looked at the photograph of Helen on the desk. Her smile was gentle the way it had been before the weight of Natalie's crime settled over her. I thought about the blue notebook, the banking records, the 28 years of silence. Helen had made an impossible choice. She had loved Natalie so much that she sacrificed everything, her inheritance, her freedom, her peace, to protect her. Even when that love was used as a weapon, and now I understood what that meant. I picked up the blue notebook and ran my fingers over the worn cover. Then I placed it in the desk drawer and closed it. Rest now, Helen, I whispered. The truth has been told. Justice has been served. And we will carry your love forward. I walked to the window. The November sky was gold and crimson, the sun setting over the city. In the distance, I could see the lights of downtown, where Angela's coffee shop stood warm and bright. Life continued. Healing began. And Helen's love, flawed, painful, but profound, would endure. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized this wasn't just my story. It's a warning. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any wound, and I learned that lesson the hardest way possible. For 28 years, Helen carried a secret that destroyed her, and I never saw it. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the signs. Don't let love blind you to the truth. These grandpa stories I'm sharing aren't just about an old man's grief. They're about recognizing when someone you love is being used. If I could go back, I would have asked more questions. I would have noticed that watch on Natalie's wrist sooner. I would have seen the exhaustion in Helen's eyes every Friday morning. But I trusted blindly, and that trust cost my wife everything. God gave us wisdom for a reason to discern truth from deception. I prayed for answers, and God revealed them piece by piece through that blue notebook, through Tony's computer work, through Trevor's courage. The Lord doesn't abandon us in our darkest moments, even when family betrayal makes us feel utterly alone. I held on to my faith when everything else crumbled, and that faith carried me to justice. My advice: pay attention. Ask questions. Don't assume that because someone shares your blood, they share your values. These grandpa stories, these painful lessons, are meant to protect you from making my mistakes. Watch for financial abuse. Watch for manipulation. Watch for the signs I missed. And remember, God sees what we cannot. When you feel lost, pray for clarity. When you feel betrayed, pray for strength. He will guide you just as He guided me. If you found meaning in these grandpa stories, please share them. Someone else might need to hear this warning about family betrayal before it's too late. Final note. This content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the core lessons about recognizing financial and emotional abuse are real. If this style doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. Please seek content that better suits your needs.